was just chatting with a German gentleman. He likes to come in and speak a few words in German to me. And he mentioned that he did some ancestry research. Well, some people like to do that, going back their family tree, parents, grandparents. And apparently he succeeded in getting back until 1720. And he could discover on his father's side an ancestor who lived in 720. However, to my mind, I would rather do a more spiritual or Dhamma ancestry research. I wouldn't be so interested to know my kind of genetic background and 10 generations back, who was that, where did they live. I would find it more interesting to know my past life and the one before and the one before. We could call that the Dhamma ancestry research, because in a sense this is closer to us. And this has a bigger impact on our spiritual qualities, on our defilements, and on everything that constitutes our kind of personality. The Buddha encouraged us to occasionally reflect on this wider perspective. Now, often we are stuck in our perspective, not just this life. Usually from the time when we have some memories, once we are a couple of years old, and the time till we die. And this is all we are taking into account. What the Buddha points out, this is just one life of a long chain where the beginning point cannot be determined. Every single one of us and every one of the animals, devas, every conscious being has been through many rebirths. Not just one previous rebirth, not just 10 or 100 or 100,000. Even if you were to go back 100 trillion births back from now, obviously there would still be another birth before that. Because nothing can come out of nothing. It's actually a very funny idea in modern materialistic worldview, that people have a kind of Sakkaya Ditthi, in an entity view, that they believe in a self, they take themselves to be a self, but they somehow believe that it just magically came out of nothing, which just doesn't make sense. Anywhere in science, anything which we encounter in our experience, nothing comes out of nothing. Everything depends on causes and conditions. That is even true in physics. There's a law about the preservation of energy. And if you have nuclear processes, you can maybe turn matter into energy or vice versa. But it never turns into nothing. And it never comes out of nothing. So it means that however far we go back, we could always go one life further back. This is why the Buddha said, Pubakoti na panyayati, original beginning point can't be discerned. The circle of samsara has no real beginning point. You can always go further back. So that means we're talking about billions and trillions of previous lives. The Buddha gives these quite mind-blowing similes now, how long that period is. For example, he says, the tears that we have cried when we lost a partner or a parent or a child, or when we had pain, or when someone hurt us or hurt our feelings. Now the tears we have cried, and he is asking the monks, what do you think is more? The tears you have cried in your past lives, all these many past lives, or the water in the 4 great oceans? What do you think? Yeah, and if we have faith in the teaching of the Buddha, and that we had so many past lives, then the tears we have cried in these countless past lives, and there's actually more than the water in the Pacific Ocean. The parents are very important persons to us in this life. But the fascinating thing is that we had parents also in past lives. And the Buddha gave a simile, just in one eon. That is the period when the universe is evolving, expanding, and then later contracting again. Sounds actually fascinatingly quite similar to the modern astrophysics theory of the Big Bang. Have you heard of the Big Bang? That is an accepted science now, that the whole universe which we have right now actually originally was in a state of what they call a singularity. It's like if you have a black hole and everything goes into one black hole, and the whole universe is just concentrated in one singular point. It's not that there's space about this point, but this singularity point is all there exists. And then for reasons which I can't figure out yet, the whole thing suddenly exploded. And the echo is actually still there, and this is how they have proved it. The echo of this first Big Bang that can be measured as a background radiation in the universe, which you get in whichever direction you point the instruments, you will get that same background. This is how they discovered that, and this is how they prove it. And I think they say it's about 15 billion years or something. Please correct me if I'm not on the latest level of knowledge there. And currently they're trying to figure out whether the universe will continue expanding or whether it will stop at some time, or whether it will stop and then start contracting again. If you know the teaching of the Buddha, you could answer that question for them. And a smart researcher would be trying to research in the direction and to find proof that it will actually stop expanding and then contract again until it's again in the singularity. Because this is how the Buddha describes it. The 4 periods when the universe is contracted, when it will be expanding, which is where we are right now, in the big scheme of things, and then it will contract again, and then it will stay contracted, and then comes the next Big Bang. So it looks like, if that interpretation is correct, and I can't say that for sure, but it sounds pretty similar, that one eon in the Buddhist counting, one kappa, is the period from one Big Bang expanding and then being back to the singularity. No one would know how to express it in billions of years, and so 15 billion years is just the expanding, and it will continue for a long time. Fascinatingly, spiritually, the time when it's expanding is actually when beings decline spiritually. Whereas the time when the universe is contracting, this is a time when beings make spiritual progress in general. And then you can explain where are all the beings in the Big Bang or in the singularity. How does it work? Now, we have so many beings, and as we already talked about, you cannot turn into nothing, just like it goes into the past. So similar, as long as a person hasn't eliminated defilements and attachments, they will continue being reborn. So a human being or any conscious being never not just turn into nothing. So where are they all if we have a Big Bang or if we have a singularity, just one point? The Buddha has answered even that question. Because sometimes people actually really ask that, with this Big Bang, how does it work? Where are all the beings? Someone just asked me, how does it work? We have so many more human beings. Where do they all come from if it's rebirth? But the answer to that one is easy, because they can come from either animals or they can come particularly from spirits and hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts may be reborn as a human. And there's so many hungry ghosts and spirits that it's quite easy to fill up a few billion more human beings by taking them from the spirits. Or they might possibly come from a different solar system. Personally, I think that's less likely. What the Buddha already told us, when the universe is fully contracted, most beings are reborn as the Abhasara Brahma, which is the second jhana realm. So it's a time of spiritual progress that the vast majority of beings is so progressed that they attain jhana, attain samadhi, and then are reborn in a completely non-material plane, at least not in a coarse matter. So it doesn't really matter to them for a long time what happens with the universe. Later, when the universe unfolds, they can come back in a coarser manifestation, in a coarser rebirth. So now we are talking, in this simile the Buddha gives, we are talking about just one eon. Probably the time from one Big Bang to the next, many, many tens and hundreds of billion of years. And the Buddha said, if you take the one little twig, like in the forest, you can find all these little twigs and leaves. You take one little piece of twig from a tree, and this is for your mother in this life, and then your father. And then you take another little piece of branch or twig. This is for your mother in your past life, and your father in your past life, and then the next lifetime back. And you would run out of wood, of twigs and leaves, before you have even put one for each mother and father you had in one eon only. So many mothers and fathers did we have in one eon. And similar, the Buddha gives a simile. If you imagine that you pass away, you get buried, and later only the bones remain. And then someone collects the bones from your body, puts it in a little heap. Now the Buddha said the bones of the bodies you had, as human, as animal, where we have this kind of body and bones. And if you collected the bones from just one eon, from the past lives you had in one eon, it would be a pile, a mountain bigger than the Himalaya. Now, this is how many lifetimes we had in just one eon. Of course, in the next question someone may ask, now, how many of such eons did we have? So already in one eon, the bones from all our bodies, more than the Himalaya. And now how many eons like that did we have? And again, the Buddha said, no, you can't really count the eons. It's difficult to say so many 100,000 or millions. But imagine the sand grains in the river Ganges. At the bottom of the river, there's usually sand. And now imagine the sand grains in the river Ganges from the source until the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean. And the Buddha said that the number of eons which we have been circling through samsara, being born, going up, getting married, working hard, struggling to get more happiness, getting older, passing away, getting reborn, getting older, passing away, getting reborn. And the number of eons is bigger than the sand grains in the river Ganges. Now, another simile, now imagine a monolith like the Ayers Rock, the Uluru, but even bigger. Now imagine that monolith 1 kilometer high, 1 kilometer wide, 1 kilometer deep, basically a square with 1 kilometer size. And now every 100 years a person comes and they take a silk cloth and then they wipe across the monolith once every 100 years. And the Buddha said that by this wiping once every 100 years, the whole monolith will be worn away before the eon has come to an end. This is how long it takes. This is how many past lives you have been undergoing. Each time the parents, siblings, you had a certain name, you had a certain kind of food, you enjoyed certain kind of ancestry, certain kind of family traditions, expectations, struggling, school, uni, getting a job, working hard, maybe getting children, getting old, retirement, if you're lucky that you live so long, and then declining, dying. And then that's all gone and you go to the next family, new parents, new siblings, and on and on and on and on and on. And the Buddha said, no, is it not enough to get weary of samsara? Didn't you have enough of all the tears you have cried? Don't you like to make an end? What is more, the blood you have been shedding when you had an operation, or when you were giving blood to the Red Cross, or when you got shot in war, or when you were an animal in a past life and you got hunted and slaughtered. What is more, the blood you have been shedding in these past lives, or the water in the great oceans? Of course, you know the answer. No, the water in the great ocean is much less than the blood we have been losing. So much suffering for so long, and still we think it's important. And once we accept this teaching about the beginningless circle of samsara, death and birth, the wheel of samsara, once we accept that teaching, there will be certain inferences which you can't deny. The first one is that you have a very short bucket list. You know that term, bucket list? Things people feel they really have to do before they die. How long is your bucket list? Going on a big cruise, seeing Paris at least once, having grandchildren or children, earning $1 million. Do you all have a bucket list? So what is on the Buddhist bucket list? There's only one item on the Buddhist bucket list. Only one. Because it's the only thing you haven't done before. What is the only thing you haven't done before? Exactly, getting enlightened, realizing Nibbana. Because you have been a human, you have been a woman, you have been a man, You have been a king or a queen, you have been a beggar, you have been a billionaire, you have been a soldier, you have been a fisherman, you have done absolutely everything. This is just the laws of statistics. Because you remember from this simile, there were so many lives. Just by the laws of statistics, you have done it all. And if on your bucket list is that you feel you want to have 10 children, or you want to have 50 grandchildren, or you want to earn 1 million, in some past life, you had done it already anyhow. What's the point? What does it give you? You may think that my bucket list, and if I did that, wow. Yeah, but you have done it, and what have you got of it? You can't even remember it. Because past lifetimes, and usually, unless people have psychic power from samadhi, they usually can't remember. So whatever is so important, you feel, now this is something I really have to do and experience and achieve in this lifetime, unless it is realizing Nibbana, you have done it. Probably even several times. So why is it so important? Every kind of rebirth, we have been there. You may think your meditation isn't so great, difficult to focus. No, you have been in Brahmaloka with the mind and samadhi totally in bliss. Maybe it's a few lifetimes back, but at some stage you have been. You have been enjoying all the pleasures of divine life, life in heaven, Devaloka, with all the sensual pleasures. You have done that, you have been there. You have been roasting in hell for 100,000 of years, being roasted with excruciating pain in hell. We have all been there. Even Venerable Mahamoggallana, the left-hand disciple, one of the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha. Have you heard of him, Venerable Mahamoggallana? The 2 chief disciples, Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Mahamoggallana. Venerable Sariputta, the first in wisdom, and Mahamoggallana, the first in psychic powers. And he could remember that due to his psychic powers. And in the same eon, he has been Mara. Mara, the Buddhist devil, the great tempter, who stops people from becoming enlightened. Isn't that amazing? That the chief disciple, one of the chief disciples of the Buddha, in the same eon, has been Mara, and because of the bad karma he made as Mara, he ended up next lifetime in hell. He could remember that as well. It also shows how amazingly we can change. In one eon you can make it from Mara, the opposite, stopping everyone from becoming enlightened, and then even roasting in hell, and then still becoming the chief disciple of the Buddha, one chief disciple in a future life in the same eon. Amazing potential how we can change. But you have been a hungry ghost, but depending on the merit sharing which we are doing here every time at Dharna time, you have been there. You have been in all different countries, nationalities you can have as a human rebirth. And once you contemplate that, you're no longer so stuck up whether you are Aussie or Vietnamese or German or Thai or Sri Lankan or French or Cambodian or Myanmar or Austrian or what else we ever have. Because now you may be Vietnamese, and in your last life you may have been German, and the life before you may have been Sri Lankan, and the one before French. And when we contemplate like that, and we no longer so attached to our race and national background, we realize that this is a fairly superficial thing which may change the moment we die and then get reborn, may be completely different. we're not so stuck up. But the most important thing is that we understand that there's actually only one thing worthwhile to put on the bucket list. There's only one place of rebirth where you haven't been reborn yet. There's only one particular sphere of rebirth where you haven't been yet in this long circle. Which one is that? Now, Nibbana wouldn't be a rebirth. Nibbana is the end of rebirth. Arupa Brahmaloka, no, not even that one. At some stage you would have been there if you go back long enough. Asanya Bhava, you probably have been there as well. But no, Anagami, Sotavasa, the pure abodes of the Anagamis. Because if you had been there, you have already seen Nibbana and you would have attained Nibbana. You wouldn't have come back to the human world. Now that's a realm which is only for those who have attained third stage of enlightenment and they are reborn in the pure abodes and then they attain Nibbana from there. Any other rebirth you had done. So whenever you feel, oh, should I go on a retreat or should I go on this cruise which is on my bucket list? Remember, strike out the cruise. You have done all the dream cruises in some past life. What's the point? And even if you do it and you die, you're in the new rebirth. What good is the cruise to you? What good is all that stuff? But whatever progress you make in the Dhamma, and in particular, and if you can see Nibbana, realize Nibbana, that's the only thing that we haven't done. That's the only thing that is the end of that all. Another inference we can draw, we don't get so concerned about conceit, mana. I'm better. I come from a good family, or I'm very educated, I'm rich, I'm successful, I'm attractive, whatever, I belong to high society, aristocracy, certain class, all these kind of conceits we may have. Yeah, maybe this life. But in a previous life, you have been the opposite. In fact, the Buddha said, it's difficult when you see any being, however miserable, wretched or disgusting, some cane toad or cockroach, some creature, some spider, something you just find disgusting, and when you see them you just want to chuck them out, or maybe not even chuck them out yourself, asking someone, oh, can you get that yucky thing out? You have been that in some past life. So how can we become big-headed and conceited about being beautiful or being a certain ways or being successful or being intelligent or whatever? How can we become conceited about that? If it's only for this life, and in past lives I may have been a cockroach, a cane toad, a person with severe disability, Down syndrome, leprosy, whatever. There is a great reflection to open up with more compassion to all beings. It's a great reflection to overcome that defilement of mana and conceit. Of course, conceit is also, I'm inferior, I'm no good, I'm from a bad background, I don't have any good education, I'm unattractive, I'm in a discriminated ways, and so on. And then people have the opposite of conceit. They have low self-esteem, or maybe even self-hatred and dislike to themselves. Yeah, but the Buddha pointed out the long circle of samsara, whatever being you see, however successful, whether it's super rich, Bezos is the richest now, ne? Is he, or Musk? Doesn't matter, whether Bezos or Musk. You have been there, you have been a billionaire in some past life. No, super attractive. There were George Clooney, or one of the Thai women is doing a movie with George Clooney. And all the girls there on the set, they're so crazy. They have rules that they are not allowed to talk to him and to try to touch him and to hug him and so on. It has to be all regulated. As he couldn't operate, the poor guy. No, or Taylor Swift or whatever, photo models, Bella Hadid, whatever you see there, and you may feel inferior in comparison. You have been a photo model. You have been a famous movie star. You have been a king or a powerful American president or whatever power brokers are in the background. You have done all that. So there's no point feeling superior or inferior if we reflect on that. Because now there may be big differences, even in your Dhamma practice. You may be good meditator, bad meditator, quiet parami, not enough parami. But if you look at the whole thing, it's like a long necklace with all these little pearls. Now each pearl is in one past life. And maybe you're very conceited if you have a pearl necklace and another person only has a little timber balls on their necklace. But the reality, you don't really have a pearl necklace, and maybe this life is a pearl, but the past life may have only been a glass, artificial jewelry, and another one may have been only timber, and another one maybe some dry dung. So if we compare each other by one life, there's maybe a big difference. But if we were to compare over a long stretch of past lives, all these differences get leveled out. And where one was big, the other was small, where one was successful, the other unsuccessful. So what's the point in being conceited? What's the point in identifying so much with a family, race, ethnic background, nationality, class, education? It changes all the time. There's still another inference. The Buddha said, any being which you see, even if it's just the wallaby or the gecko, any human being, statistically, this was so long. At some stage, that was a close relative. The Buddha said it's actually difficult to encounter a single being that has not been your mother in some past life. And if not your mother, then maybe your father. At some past life, we have been very close. So if we reflect on that, then we can develop compassion and loving kindness. Do you get very angry with your mother if she is maybe sometimes saying something you don't like? Or do you feel, now this is my mother, she has done so much and I love her, never mind? And so similar, all these beings you may find so irritating, at some past life they have been close, like a mother. And we can say the same thing. We feel no longer so separate, and we can develop empathy, compassion, loving kindness for all beings. So maybe to sum it up, occasionally we should widen our perspective, not just stuck in this life, but we had so many millions, billions, trillions of past lives, eons, from Big Bang, whole universe unfolding many, many times. And we have quite more tears in these past lives than water in the ocean. We have shed more blood than water in the ocean. And we are still not weary of it. Why do we still want to continue that on? This is what is the point? Whatever you try to achieve, whatever you feel is so important that you don't really have time to meditate, in just a few years and then you pass away, and what is the point in it then? And my mother actually didn't like me to ordain. They gave permission that should be doing what makes me happy, they said very wisely and with a true matter. But she was never really happy, and in particular she would have loved not to have grandchildren. I mean, my sister could have done that. She's in Layla, still doesn't have grandchildren. But that was one thing that she would have really liked. But suppose I had listened to that, and I hadn't ordained, or I had disrobed, and I had grandchildren. My mother died in 2015. So what would be the point now in these grandchildren? What would it do to her? She's reborn somewhere, I don't know where, and very most likely she has no memory of that life as my mother by now. She wouldn't know about these grandchildren anymore. Just one example. And if we reflect like that, then all these things which appear so incredibly important to us, they fade away. What's the point? If you look at these huge time frames, all this stuff which appears so important to us, and it just fades away. Except for the one thing which is on every Buddhist bucket list. Seeing Nibbana, realizing Nibbana, enlightenment. That is the one thing which really makes a difference, because that's the one thing which ends that whole pointless cycle. Nibbana is the only way of ending birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Do you find it very easy to take that very important if you watch maybe a documentary about these insects which may live only one day, get born and then they quickly reproduce in one day and then this life is over? It appears so pointless to us. When in Germany, they usually die off anyhow, all the insects. For winter, so even the longer living ones, and it's just one season, and you look at it and, gosh, now what's the point? But once we are contemplating these many lifetimes, and we also look at our troubles and tribulations and great important things, what's the point from that wide perspective? Except the one thing on the bucket list, realizing Nibbana. That is important because that actually ends it. So I hope I could convince you to strike a few things off your bucket list, and I trust people coming here that Nibbana has already entered there. But I'm not sure what is your priorities. Strike out a few things. And if you ever feel getting very elated, a little bit big-headed, and contemplate whatever misery you see other beings, we have been there. We have been cockroaches and cane toads and beggars. If you ever feel really down, And inferior, just contemplate, you had it all. You've been a movie star, a photo model, a billionaire, a king, and so on. If you regret, oh, I never had children, they say a woman hasn't really lived until she had children. You got more children than you can count in past lives. But what is so important about it? And if you ever feel angry at a being, another fellow being, contemplate in some past life, you were as close as husband and wife, as close as mother and child. And how can we then be angry? How can we kill other beings? The one reason that we have that precept. Okay, so offer a few reflections about samsara and the Buddhist bucket list. Any comments? Jan? Someone is pointing out in another Dhamma talk, I called people my dear future devas, and I encouraged them to practice generosity, virtue, loving kindness, and so on, so that they can attain a rebirth as a deva. Whereas today I'm talking more about ending the whole process of rebirth altogether. There's no total contradiction. Now, often it does take a couple of lifetimes. It's not so easy to have the power me that you in this life you can completely end it. So, and as you are practicing, one result may be that you then have a rebirth as a deva, which is certainly much better than a rebirth in hell, much better than a rebirth as a hungry ghost, much better than a rebirth as an animal, or better than a rebirth as a human being in tough conditions. So I don't think there's a full contradiction. But ultimately, rebirth as a deva wouldn't be the ultimate aspiration. But we want to be reborn only as a deva, with the aspiration that we continue practice and then ultimately also leave the deva realm behind. But I wouldn't see a direct contradiction. But if you have both on your bucket list, rebirth as a deva and nibbana, I think that's already pretty good. It's better than having the cruise and $1 million and 50 grandchildren or something like that. So I don't think I would blame anyone if they have a 2-item bucket list, Nibbana and rebirth in Devaloka. It's already pretty good, and you can kind of combine it, because even a stream enterer who has already seen Nibbana and who is completely safe, and they will definitely attain it with a max of 7 lives, they can still be reborn in Devaloka a couple of times. Yeah. for podcast, if you have a question, what factors contributes to a particular rebirth, say as a Vietnamese or as a powerful person and so on. There's basically two factors. One is your karma, and the other is your aspiration, your intention, your desire. And even if you don't formulate a specific, very direct and conscious intention, there's always subconscious desires. But they both have to come together. So if you have very bad karma and an aspiration to be reborn as a Vietnamese in Vietnam, it will not work out because you have only bad karma and then you wouldn't even make a human rebirth. If you have lots of good karma and the aspiration to be reborn as a Vietnamese in Vietnam, then that will come to fulfillment. It's a bit like with money. In order to get something, you need usually in our rich society, where everything is usually available, you need money and then the intention. And then you just buy it with your money. And if your intention is to have a beautiful house, but you have no money, it will not go anywhere. If you have lots of money, but you're not interested in a beautiful house, and you just buy an old shack, you can do that as well. So the money is like your good karma, your punya, and the intention, what you buy, is like your aspiration. But I would never recommend anyone to have an aspiration like, no, I want to be reborn in that country, in that nationality, because I think, why would you want to direct your good karma to that? I would rather recommend to direct your aspiration to say, may I be reborn with really virtuous parents who have faith and who are practicing Dhamma. I think that is a more beneficial one. I wouldn't really mind so much whether I'm in Australia or in Vietnam or in Sri Lanka or Thailand if I get reborn with really good parents and in a place where I could also say maybe reborn in a place where the Dhamma is really strong, where the Sasana is strong, rather than just picking nationality. But you see, a lot of that will be subconscious. And I mean, here many people have a little bit of multicultural background, but say my father, if he gets a human rebirth, I can well imagine that he is a German again. Because he has lived all his life in Germany. Virtually all the people he knows are Germans. There's a language he speaks some English and so on. So it's unlikely, where would the aspiration come from that he's suddenly born in Vietnam? And I could notice that this must be different karmic background. Now I often feel very at ease in different Buddhist nationalities. Sometimes I'm actually quite shocked. I remember in Singapore, because I feel quite at home there, and then we are going into a lift, and then there's this big mirror, and I see now how freakishly tall I am. I'm standing out and look totally different. I don't really feel like that. Or in Sri Lanka, and suddenly you see another Westerner, and you see how pale they're looking. Didn't quite feel that I'm so different. But my father doesn't quite have that. When I take him, say, when he was in Sri Lanka, you could see he's quite alien to him. So a lot will be subconscious. And then subconsciously, usually we want to be attractive, we want to be rich, we want to be powerful, we want to be successful in a worldly way, we want to have sensual indulgences. And that is all subconscious desires. And the danger is you make now good karma, and then a lot of that money, so to speak, will be used for all these subconscious desires. So you make lots of good karma, and then you're reborn in a rich family, super attractive, get good education, and so on, and live the jet-set life, which is fair enough, and it can be quite enjoyable, but spiritually it's not, what's the point? because again, then you die and it's all over. And so it is very important to make a deliberate, conscious resolution and aspiration, so that the good karma is not going into all this useless stuff from our subconscious desire, but that you deliberately direct your good karma to developing parami and being born in an environment where you can really practice, and having parents, which, you're very lucky and you had that anyhow, which encourage you to Dhamma practice from early age. And that takes effort, because these subconscious desires tend to take over, and so it takes a big effort to always direct the aspiration to these lofty goals. It's just like spending your money prudently. And some people who have strong desires, they just waste their money. It just goes into partying and drugs and gambling and what other stuff they're doing. So important not to spend our good karma like that. Now, some people save their money and maybe they actually use it to make good karma. So similar, when you have your good karma, you want to direct it to something that is spiritually valuable. What is used as an attractive body. Elvis Presley was so attractive when they asked the guys who were always hanging out with him, this Memphis Mafia, how many girlfriends he had. I think they answered he never had more than 2 or 3 at any one time. Super attractive. But he died at 42 or something. So what is the use of having an attractive body that every woman throws herself at you, or having as a woman that every man is after you? What is the benefit really? What is the benefit of being a billionaire? What's the benefit now of being super rich? On the other hand, if you're born in a family which imparts the Buddhist values to you right away, there's so many of these great Kruba Ajahns that come from very, very simple subsistence farming background. But they had great parami, and these families and the environment was suitable for practice. So thank you for that question. So it's really important, your good karma and the aspiration. Just like you have to spend your money prudently, you have to direct your good karma for developing parami and making progress.
Having now so many Western monks, I was thinking, in the past life, who were they, and they have aspiration to be reborn in a country where there is no Buddhism, being born in America, UK, Germany, Austria, and then why the aspiration wasn't be reborn in a country where there's already Buddhism and Dhamma is so easily available.
I would love to know as well. I'd love to know. Someone is just asking, we have quite a few Western monks now, and what is the karmic reason where have they been and what kind of aspiration they had in order to be born in a Western non-Buddhist country but then still becoming a monk. And the working of karma in detail can be quite complicated. Now I can't really answer that. With some, like for example Ajahn Jayasaro, who is very Thai and lives in Thai such a long time, then maybe he was a disciple of Luang Por Chah in a past life already. And for a tradition which then is spreading out internationally, it's probably quite helpful if some of his disciples are not reborn in Thailand as a disciple, but are reborn in a Western country, that they go up there and have that conditioning that they can actually relate to Westerners, can relate to that non-Buddhist country because they grew up there, they have the language as native language, and they know how people think and feel. Of course, the danger is that they may end up losing the connection to Buddhism, so that for that one to work, they need to have sufficient power me that even being born with maybe a non-Buddhist family, which many of those Western monks are, they're in a non-Buddhist family, in a non-Buddhist environment, but then you need to have enough power me that you don't get lost and lose your connection. But if then they reconnect, and in the case of, for example, Ajahn Jayasaro or maybe Luangpo Sumedho, then they can do a huge service in teaching in these countries. Because then they have both. They get the Buddhist education and they have already Parami, and they have the cultural conditioning and training that they can relate and teach. Luangpo Sumedho may be that kind of person. He may have had contact with Luangpo Cha in some previous life, maybe even in China or somewhere. But how it works out in detail and what kind of aspiration they had, I can't really answer that. I would love to know myself. In my case, it wasn't fully smooth, and there were difficult periods where later in school and when I started studying and not really knowing what to do. It took me till 27 to really get the reconnection to the Dhamma. And when I look back now I feel I was also in danger. It's very easy to get into bad karma quite easily, whether it's alcohol and drugs or... I served in the armed forces, but in those days they were not fighting. They would have fought only in Third World War. It probably wouldn't make much difference those days where you are, basically. But nowadays you may also go into armed forces and they end up fighting and killing. And so when I look back now, I think, gosh, lucky that maybe some good karma got me back before I get lost. There's actually not a single Buddhist anywhere in my family, and even in any of my old friends. Maybe some a little bit interested, but someone you would call a Buddhist or real Dhamma practitioner is not a single one. And that there's a danger that you lose a connection. So if you want to do that kind of aspiration, then make sure that you have the being born in a barbarian country where the Dhamma isn't there, and then trying to... But I think Australia is already reasonably good. And we are working all hard to make it even more suitable.
Members.
60 members, a big Chinese family. Mm-hmm.
So I think these Western monks have done a tremendous work in sharing the Dhamma, which I'm very, very grateful. Otherwise, I would have no access to
Sadhu. Someone just pointing out how useful the English translation and English teaching were to her from these monks. So I want to join Anumodana Mudita Katanyuta to Luangpo Sumedho was the very first trailblazer. And one reason that Luangpo Cha's tradition is so successful is obviously because of these Western monks and the Western monasteries. And that is a crucial contribution. I think one reason that Tibetan tradition has become so successful in the West is also simply because they were fleeing Tibet. Now, although that destroyed Tibetan Buddhism to a large extent, not completely, but it was a huge damage in terms for the Western countries. That had a huge impact because all these teachers then had to live in the West, and quite a few of them started learning English. So it is an important contribution. And fortunately they had enough parami, but of course we only know the ones where it worked out, that they had enough parami that they found the Dhamma even being born in a Western country. And the ones who maybe had parami were born in a Western country and then got lost to materialism, we wouldn't know. There may have been a few as well. Okay, thanks for your interest, good questions. So please shorten your bucket list. Contemplate the range of samsara and what's the point and all that stuff you have on your bucket list. Nibbana is the only one which is really worthwhile. 3 p.m.